Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. You know what the news is. In a minute, you're going to hear the rest of the story. Now, the rest of the story. They were the first minority on Manhattan. They were disliked. They were distrusted. They were the objects of unflattering humor. They were called all sorts of names, one so insulting that they adopted it into their own native language. They were the Holland Dutch. This is the rest of the story. The Dutch were here first, you know. It was Dutchman Peter Minuit who purchased Manhattan from the Indians in 1626. The settlement was called New Amsterdam, later to become the seat of government for the colony of New Netherland. The Dutch West India Company paid little attention to the settlers at first. For 3 years, New Amsterdam attracted a rough bunch, privateers, smugglers, so on. The first organized social system in the colony was a kind of feudalism, huge estates with dozens of tenant families on each. The early governors and councils ruled without popular assemblies and were renowned for their harshness. Meanwhile, the British were growing perturbed over the presence of New Netherland, an obtrusive interruption in the sequence of their coastal possessions, and so in 1664, a small English naval force set out to capture the Dutch colony, and the Dutch surrendered without firing a shot. 7,000 of them decided to accept British rule in order to keep their homes, and for a while, Anglo-Dutch relations were not bad. Yet, as hostilities developed between the respective motherlands, the English inhabitants of the colony, now known as New York, grew increasingly unfriendly toward the Dutch minority. First privately, ultimately publicly, the British New Yorkers began making fun of them. Anything negative was automatically characterized as being Dutch. Many related phrases remain even today a part of our vernacular. Anybody who is stern and hypercritical, we still call a Dutch uncle. A Dutch treat, of course, that's no treat at all. Getting into trouble, we often refer to as getting in Dutch. And the slurs don't stop there. Dutch widow once meant prostitute. Frogs used to be called Dutch nightingales. One who was said to have taken the Dutch route had killed himself. Dutch defense was surrender. Dutch praise was condemnation. Dutch courage was extracted from a bottle. And a Dutch medley, that's when everybody sings a different tune simultaneously, and the list goes on. But there was one epithet to which the Dutch themselves particularly objected. You know how ethnic slurs often reflect the foods with which a minority may be identified? Well, the Dutch were supposedly characteristically fond of cheese, so the English began referring to Dutchmen as John Cheese, and it upset the Dutch so much that they eventually turned the nasty nickname around, actually began calling Englishmen John Cheese, in the language of the Netherlands, naturally. And it was that epithet which made the most indelible impression of all. In time, the whole world would forget that a hangover was once defined as Dutchman's headache, that Dutch gold meant the phony stuff. But what we remember is the unflattering term John Cheese, a label the Dutch ultimately laid on us. The way they said it was John Cheese, J-A-N, Jan, K-E-E-S, Jan Kees, Jan Kees, Jan Kees. That's how we became Yankees. Now you know the rest of the story.